What's up guys, my name is Ace and welcome back to another gun guide. This is the series where I go into great detail with all of the stats of every one of the weapons in Modern Warfare. And at the end of the last episode when we wrapped up LMGs, I asked you guys which class of weapons you'd like me to cover next, and the answer was pretty overwhelmingly the pistol category, so let's hop into it and kick it off with the X16. Starting it off with damage, pistols have quite a few different multiplier zones in the body. We've got limb damage, which is going to be the lowest amount of damage. Then there's a lower torso damage multiplier, which is a little bit more damage. And then finally, we have the upper torso damage multiplier, which is what our main focus is going to be. So our upper torso damage is 42, 36, 29, meaning this gun will be a 3 to 4 shot kill, assuming you're hitting them in the upper torso, or actually in this case, the lower torso as well. It's still going to be a 3 to 4 shot kill. Keep in mind, this damage profile is identical to the 1911 as well as the M19 in this game. As for headshots, this is actually doubled from our lower torso values, which is pretty insane. We get a very good headshot multiplier. We get a headshot damage profile of 72, 60, 50. So it's always going to be a 2-shot kill, assuming both bullets hit in the head, or you could even mix in an arm shot with a headshot up close, and you're going to get a 2-shot kill, which is amazing. So clearly, headshots are a big deal when it comes to pistols, and you really want to try and focus on those, at least in core game modes. Moving on to our rate of fire cap, this is 309 rounds per minute with the standard trigger. We'll get into the triggers a little bit later in the video that increase or decrease this fire rate. And keep in mind, this fire rate is just right in between the 1911 and the M19. Now, our theoretical minimum time to kill in the 3-shot kill range is 388 milliseconds, which is very slow if you're comparing it to the standard time to kill of primary weapons in this game. And it's also not very forgiving. As soon as you drop off to the 4-shot kill, it's now 582 milliseconds for your time to kill, which is extremely slow. The saving grace, though, is the headshot multiplier. Our time to kill potential, assuming we get a 2-shot kill, that can be a shot anywhere in the body as well as one in the head. This will give us a time to kill potential of 194 milliseconds, which is now a very competitive time to kill with the primaries in this game. So if you are using a secondary against a full health enemy in core game modes, you definitely want to be hitting a headshot. Now, moving on to ranges, as you can see here, our 3-shot kill range extends pretty far out to about 20 meters, which is great. Although you might notice at about 10 meters, there's another drop-off point within the 3-shot kill range. This is just important to note because if you're within that 10 meters, you can hit them anywhere in the torso, whether that be the stomach or the chest, and it'll be a 3-shot kill. Whereas between 10 to 20 meters, you can only get a 3-shot kill to the body if you're hitting them in the upper torso. Lower torso will be a 4-shot kill at this point. As for suppressors, the monolithic and lightweight suppressors behave just how you'd expect. Lightweight suppressor reduces your ranges by 25%, monolithic increases your ranges by 7.5%. However, we also have the oil can suppressor, which a lot of people have been curious about. It turns out, at least on the X16, this is bugged. It says that it should be increasing your range. This isn't true at all. It decreases your range by 15%. So at least until they get this fixed, stay away from the oil can suppressor. It's only going to be hurting you. Now, getting into hardcore modes, which is important because a lot of people like using pistols in hardcore. From 0 to 10 meters, this is a guaranteed 1-shot kill. You can shoot them in the foot or the head. It doesn't matter. It'll be a 1-shot kill. However, after that 10-meter range, you will get a hit marker if you shoot them in the limbs. Anywhere in the torso or head out to 20 meters is still going to be a 1-shot kill, and then after 20 meters, this is where it's going to be a 2-shot kill anywhere in the body, although it's always a 1-shot headshot, even across the map. So in hardcore modes, the X16 is actually pretty solid, especially when you consider a lot of the other factors that we'll be looking at in a little bit, like the handling and mobility. Now, moving on to Hipfire, the X16 has a great Hipfire spread, and it is equal to the 1911 as well as the M19. When it comes to idle sway, I was actually quite surprised to see that there's very little movement with this while aiming down sight. I honestly thought it would be moving around a whole lot more than it does, and I think this is definitely one of the big upsides to this gun. This brings us next into recoil, which, as you can see here, there is a little bit of recoil with this. It will kick upwards, and there's some side-to-side variability here. But overall, with a semi-auto that's quite easy to control, as well as the ranges that you'll typically be engaging people in with a pistol, I would say recoil isn't really a problem at all with the X16. Now, moving into our handling stats, our aim down sight time is crazy fast at 150 milliseconds. This is way faster than any of the primaries in the game, which is a big upside to using a pistol. As for our sprint out time, this is also insanely fast at 150 milliseconds, and our tactical sprint out time is also still very, very fast at just 184 milliseconds, so there's very little downside to using tactical sprint with this. Getting into magazine capacity, our standard magazine is 13 rounds, and this will give us 26 in reserve, which is nice if you're using it as a secondary, but if you're trying to use this as a primary weapon, typically you'll want to use either Scavenger or pair this with a primary weapon that's also chambered in 45 ACP, which will share an ammo reserve pool. One thing I actually recommend if you are trying to go pistol only with the X16 is put the Striker 45 on with extended mags and fully loaded, and that will give you a crazy ammo pool to draw from while using your X16. You should never really be running out of ammo then. As for our reload add time, this is very fast, just like we'd expect with a pistol, at just 1.1 seconds, although if you wanted to, you could speed this up even more by using the sleight of hand weapon perk, and this will cut it down to 0.8 seconds, which is nearly instant. Now, getting into movement speed, things are going to look a little bit strange here because something changed since launch. When the game launched, I used pistols as my baseline movement speed, which is traditionally in Call of Duty 100%. And that's what I've been basing my movement speed percentages off for every one of the other guns I've covered in this series. When I retested this for this gun guide a few days ago, the X16 has a movement speed of 103% now. So at some point between the launch of the game and now, it appears they have buffed the movement speed on pistols, and it's now over 100%, or it might technically be the new 100%, but that would change all the values for all the other guns I covered. So just to keep things consistent, it's 103% for our movement speed, which is ridiculously fast. As for our aim down sight stray speed, this is also insanely fast at 73%. So if you're strafing side to side in a gunfight, you're going to be a much more difficult target to shoot than somebody using an assault rifle, for instance. And with that, that pretty much covers it for the base stats of the X16, although there's one other thing I wanted to mention, and this applies to the 1911 and the M19 as well. The bullet velocity on this gun is low enough that it actually does make a noticeable difference in-game. So if you are trying to challenge somebody at a pretty long range, you do have to lead your shot with this. And on top of that, you might notice a pretty significant delay from when you pull the trigger to when you actually get a hit marker back to your client. With all the primaries in this game, bullet velocity is generally not a big factor. With pistols, it absolutely is something you need to be aware of because it will actually impact the outcome of many situations. But now that we have that out of the way, it's time to move into the unique attachments for the X16, and there are a lot of them. There's actually more to get into with pistols than many of the primaries in this game when it comes to attachments. So starting it off with barrels, first up we have the Syngard Arms Featherweight Barrel, and with this one it improves your aim down sight time by 1 frame at 60 FPS, so your new aim down sight time is 133 milliseconds, which I think is just completely overkill and unnecessary. And the downside to this is a loss in bullet velocity, which is going to harm your ability to hit those targets at longer ranges, and it also decreases your damage range by roughly 15%. So for me, I would say the upside for this is completely unnecessary. Your aim down sight time is so fast, and you don't want those downsides, so I never recommend using this barrel. As for the second barrel, this is the Vanguard Elite Barrel, and with this one, we get a 20% increase to our damage ranges, which is really nice to have. On top of that, we get improved bullet velocity, which makes a big difference with the pistols, so that's great as well, and we get an improvement to our recoil control, which if we have a look at the new recoil here, it's definitely a little bit better than the base recoil, not by a massive margin by any means, but it is a nice little bonus on top of that increased damage range as well as bullet velocity. Now the downsides to this are, first off, we get a slight reduction to our aim down sight speed. It's 1 frame slower at 60 FPS, so 167 milliseconds, which is still insanely fast. And also our movement speed is reduced by about 2%, so we're still over 100% for our movement speed, it's just a little bit slower. Personally, I do think this is a great barrel for the X16. But finally, we have one last barrel here, and this is the Syngard Arms Advantage Barrel, and with this one, we once again get a 20% increase to our damage range, which is awesome, and we still get that increase to our bullet velocity, which is also great with pistols. And the only downside to this is it reduces our aim down sight speed by 1 frame, so it's 167 for our new aim down sight time. So this is basically the same as the previous barrel, without the improved recoil control, which was hardly noticeable anyways, and we don't lose any movement speed. And this is why I would say this is the best barrel that you can use for the X16. As for the next unique attachment, this is the X16 stock, which is actually in the grip section. And this one's very unique. This helps with recoil control, and I also wanted to point out, pay attention to those iron sights. Your entire perspective changes because you pull the pistol in closer to yourself, which just changes the overall look and feel while using this gun. But you can see there, the recoil control is absolutely improved by a pretty noticeable amount. And on top of that, we get better aim walking steadiness as well as aiming stability. So while aiming down sight, it's not going to move around as much, but like I said earlier, this gun barely moves while aiming down sight anyways. So right up front, I would say this probably isn't worth using. But let's go over the downsides. Our aim down sight speed is slowed down by, once again, 1 frame at 60 FPS, so not really that bad. However, our aim down sight stray speed is reduced by about 20%, which is a huge reduction in this area. And as a result, I would say in most situations at least, the upsides just aren't going to be worth the downsides for you with the X16 stock. Moving on to the next set of unique attachments, these are the extended mag attachments. First up, we have the 17 round extended mag, which will slightly reduce your aim down sight speed just by 1 frame, and it will slow your overall movement speed by about 1.5%. Now, if you want to take that to the next level, you can have a 26 round extended mag, which is pretty crazy, and this once again slows your aim down sight speed by just 1 frame. However, our movement speed is reduced by a whole 3%, which is quite a big reduction. Of course, you're still going to be fast, you still have that 100% movement speed, but if you are using this as a secondary and you often switch to your secondary to get from point A to point B faster, you might want to consider not using the 26 round extended mag, because then you're not getting as much of a boost to your speed. Now finally, for unique attachments, we're getting into the triggers, and the triggers are very important when it comes to pistols, because these are the only attachments that allow you to actually impact your time to kill potential. So here are the rate of fire values for each of the triggers. The lightweight will boost your rate of fire by 30%, taking it up to 405 rounds per minute. The heavy duty trigger reduces our rate of fire by 20%, so it takes it down to 254 rounds per minute. And the match grade trigger will increase our rate of fire by just 10%, up to 339 rounds per minute. Now, each of them have their own little downsides as well. Most of these I can't really quantify anyways, and they aren't really that big of a deal, but I will say for the match grade trigger, our hipfire diameter is increased by 25%, so it's somewhat noticeable. But overall, this applies to basically all of the triggers. I just recommend going for the lightweight trigger because this gives you a pretty decent improvement to our potential time to kill values. So for me at least, I use the lightweight trigger 100% of the time when I'm using the X16. So that finally wraps it up for the unique attachments for this pistol. And what I've decided for this series, instead of showing you best class setups with the pistols, that wouldn't make as much sense because most people aren't using these as primaries anyways, and really you can just use them how you want. Instead, I just wanted to share my favorite attachments to use on the pistol. I think this is just a better way to represent things for a sidearm. So my favorite attachments, monolithic suppressor. I like staying off the radar. I like that slight boost to the range as well. And the downsides really aren't that bad for this. The Syngard Arms Advantage barrel as well, like I said earlier, that's my favorite barrel to use. Absolutely the lightweight trigger, that's going to be on this gun every single time I use it. And then one of the extended mag attachments. You could go with either 17 or 26, depending on how much movement speed you're willing to lose. And then sometimes I'll use an optic. I would say more so if I use the gun in hardcore, I will tend to use a red dot of some sort. Whereas in core modes, it's more so I just try and spam in the direction of the enemy towards their head, so I don't really need that precision as much. Additionally, if you are using this as a primary, I'd either recommend using the fully loaded weapon perk, or, like I said earlier, combine it with the Striker 45 and put fully loaded on that weapon, so that you save yourself a perk on this and you still get a huge increase to your reserve ammo. And with that, that pretty much covers it for the X16 pistol. As for my thoughts on this, I would say it's a nice little middle ground between the 1911 and the M19. And for me and my playstyle and my trigger finger, I do prefer using this over the 1911, but I actually kind of prefer the M19 over the X16 just due to its slightly faster fire rate. But we will be getting into those other pistols in the next few episodes of Gun Guides, so I hope you guys are excited for that one. As always though, I'd like to know in the comment section below, what do you guys think about this gun? Is this your favorite pistol to use, least favorite pistol, or just somewhere in the middle? Just let me know those thoughts in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.